there, and welcome back to The Bible is Clear, except when it isn't. Is it wise to read the Bible literally? There's a movement within Christianity called Young Earth Creationism. Young Earth Creationism is a relatively modern belief that the world is between 6,000 and 10,000 years old. How do Christians arrive at this conclusion when scientists tell us that the Earth is more than 4.5 billion years old? That's a big discrepancy. We're not talking about a couple of decades here. We're talking about literal billions of years. Young Earth Creationism comes from following the accounts of creation as we see in the book of Genesis. If we start with the beginning, as outlined in Genesis 1:1, and we follow the lineage of Adam and his descendants until today, taking into consideration the ages of all the biblical characters when they died, we arrive at the approximate age of the Earth in the thousands of years rather than in the billions. And by the way, there's no discrepancy in the scientific world. While we don't know the Earth's exact age, and we could be off by as many as 50 million years in our estimate, we know that the age of the world is billions of years old. So now what? Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are the keys to teach us that we simply cannot read the Bible literally. How so? Well, because Genesis 1 and 2 give us contradictory narratives of the creation of the Earth. Take some time to read Genesis 1 and 2. Pause the video if you'd like and restart it when you're ready. Now, what did you notice? In Genesis 1, our reading begins with, "in the beginning." Unless, of course, we look at the NRSV UE, which is the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition, which starts with, "when God began to create." Why this change? Well, because the Hebrew text does not contain a definite article. A more accurate translation from the Hebrew is "in a beginning" and not "in the beginning." And see how that language changes? When we hear the story of God creating night and day, water and land, sun and moon, sea creatures and land beasts, and finally humans. Then, in Genesis 2, God creates man to inhabit a wasteland and to till the ground and to harness the water and the earth and the garden. While in Genesis 1, God creates humankind in God's image, in Genesis 2, God creates man first, breathes air into his nostrils, and then creates woman to be a companion. The stories in Genesis 1 and 2 are different. They contradict. They don't give us the same story, but do they communicate a larger truth? Yes. So what is the intention of the creation narratives in Genesis? Are they supposed to be literal accounts of creation? While some indeed say yes, I can't fathom how this would be the case. We already agreed that scientists teach us that the Earth is billions of years old. We know that there were animals who lived and went extinct long before there were ever humans here. We know that that evolution is a reality and that creatures continue to evolve. Don't believe me? Then simply look at a human skeleton. Why do we have a tailbone? Because humans at one time had tails. We no longer need them, so evolution took care of them and got rid of them. We see wildlife in Australia that's different than wildlife anywhere else on the planet. Why? Because Australia is isolated. We see the same phenomenon on the Hawaiian Islands. Birds and plants live in Hawaii that simply don't exist anywhere else. They've been able to evolve to the climate and the terrain. We've seen evolution literally take place during human lifespans. So how do we read Genesis with a heart and mind that's open to receiving new information? We acknowledge that Genesis was written at a time when people were still trying to make sense of things. We know information now that we didn't know then, and we look for the larger truth. Regardless of how the earth was created, Genesis is a book that teaches us that the earth was created, and that it was created by an all-powerful God who created humankind in God's image, and that each of us is inherently good, and that many animals, including humans, reproduce by sexual reproduction. It puts the pieces together. Does this mean that only opposite-sex couples ought to be together, and that all opposite-sex couples who have children ought to stay together forever? While some fundamentalist readings certainly suggest that, the answer is simply no. We know that sexual reproduction in humans requires specific biologics like sperm cells and egg cells, and a womb where a fetus can develop. But there doesn't have to be heterosexual intercourse to make that happen. If a sperm and an egg meet, that gets the job done. But we didn't know that when Genesis was written. The acknowledgement of the existence of a sperm cell and an egg cell weren't known about by science until within the last couple hundred years. Sperm cells were discovered in 1677, and egg cells weren't discovered until 1827. Human authors of the scriptures were trying to make sense of things that they didn't yet understand, and at the same time they were sharing a larger truth. God created the earth. God created life. God created humankind. Humankind is inherently good. That is the message of Genesis. That is a message that is not corrupted by the contradictions found in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2.